Welcome to the Phygital Dish, where we serve up fresh insights on how technology is bridging the gap between the physical and the digital, creating seamless and personalized interactions for businesses and consumers alike. Let's dig in.
Welcome to the Phygital Dish. As you know, I'm Ivy Dixon, and I'm here with Courtney Radke. Courtney, we're out here doing our thing and trying to roll. It's we're into the new year. We're into 2025. Amazingly enough, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Where did it go?
Exactly. Where did it go? Where did it go? Well, hopefully 2025 is kicking off for everybody in a good way. Today we're gonna talk about something kind of interesting. As we were prepping for this, you made a joke about He-Man superpower, and we're gonna talk a little bit about power today. So, as an appetizer, right? We always talk a little bit about an appetizer here on the Phygital Dish, and then we'll get into the meat of it around main course and wrap it up with a little dessert. But I was having two massive trees taken out of my backyard. And you and I have talked about this. We both love home ownership, right? It's just fantastic. So I had two trees that grew right up next to each other. Yeah, exactly. And I was thinking about power because I was standing at the back of my house watching the tree guys use the stump grinder. Have you ever seen a stump grinder?
I have. They're so interesting to me.
Well, so here's the cool part about this stump grinder. First of all, it has this massive blade on it, right? 12, 13 inches. It's spinning probably at about 2,000 RPMs. And the thing is just grinding up this massive stump. But my favorite part, I think, was that the guy is standing there running the stump grinder with a remote control. It's like joystick style. So, you start to think about the power not only in that spinning blade, but in the actual machine, but then in this battery powered remote control, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. I've seen the old style ones. I've seen some of the really cool ones that they're not a stump grinder, but it's got the thing that wraps around a tree and takes everything off in 2 seconds. The remote control aspect is really cool. They can just stand back instead of being right in the heart of destruction and
literally. Now I will say there is some, even with that remote control, there is a fair amount of danger that I felt for this man because he was about 4.5 feet away because he's done it so many times. And I thought to myself, if I'm having a remote, I'm going to ask if I can stand inside and run the remote, right? So
come in, watch it from the window like you probably were, just sitting
literally
there
just hanging out. I could get him I could make him a cup of coffee and right. Yeah. But that leads us to this idea of ongoing power management.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And this idea of beyond battery and beyond fuel but in a restaurant, this idea of ongoing power management. And I know one of the things you've spent a lot of time on in the last few months and over your career is this idea of managed power. So why don't you take a minute and give us just kind of a headline of that first bite of what is managed power and why do people look at it?
Yeah, you brought up He-Man, and it's interesting. The I have the power, and
right?
But do you, right?
Right.
What we've been talking about a lot really over the last 9 months is not a new technology. In fact, it's probably one of the older technologies that's out there. If you look at data centers, traditional data centers, and business critical, mission critical type applications, they've always had clean, resilient, redundant power. You always smart power, so that things are plugged in, where things are plugged in, how much power they're drawing. We've seen that for 20 plus years or more inside of the data center and critical systems. But what we're seeing now, Ivy, is we want to have that same level of smart inside of a retailer, inside of a restaurant, inside of these distributed organizations, because that's been one of the missing links. I had a conversation earlier this week that they have to either send people out, or they have their untrained hands in the stores unplugging things, turning things back on, switching things around to different outlets, and it's just it's a task they shouldn't be doing. And in the era where technology is ruling everything, it dawned on the industry and dawned on us that, well, why don't we have a solution for that? And so that's kind of what Bohr, managed power solutions, and that's kind of what we're talking about, the ability to provide clean, efficient, resilient power that can also be redundant power, but just smart to be able to have some context into what is inside my stores and answer the age-old question of, did you turn it off and back on again?
Right.
Because now we know.
Right.
You turned it on, and not only do we know when you did it, and you did it 20 times. Why did you?
You did it continuously 20 times, right?
That's the problem. And it really starts to talk to, and it was a technology leader at a large retailer. He said it so eloquently that what we're going to see as some of the biggest benefits we have in technology over the next couple of years is on the operational efficiency side. The cool bells and whistles is one thing. The getting faster speeds and all of that stuff, it's great. We want all that. But getting more efficient and having more insight into how your organizations run, that is going to be a huge thing going over the next 5 years.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something there that's so key. And if you've listened to any of the previous episodes or you've heard Court and I talk before, we talk about this always on protocol, right? And when you start to talk about power and you use the words, you use that clean word, you use the resilient word, the consistency environment, these are things that align with that idea of always on. And I think that's actually a great segue if we move kind of into the depth of the main course here. I was out on the road one more time, and I was out traveling around, and I stopped somewhere and I drove through a drive-through, and one of the menu boards was down. The other one was up and running. The one wasn't running. And I said to the girl, hey, by the way, I'm not sure if you know, but your menu board is off. She goes, yeah, there's no power out there. I said, well, one of them's on. She goes, yeah, there's something wrong with the other one, and there's no power. It was that moment of, okay, that's not always on, right? But from that perspective, I think one of the things that I was not aware of until fairly recently, as you started to bring this to life, not only in just general SageNet terms, but also from a market perspective. When you look at those devices that need to be always on, and you talked a little bit about data centers, and we all think, from a data center perspective, there's this idea of always up, right? I mean, literally, how many nines can you stick on the end of that 999 conversation? Yeah. In the world of managed power, how does a restaurant or a retailer look for those things that need to be managed? How do they find those either mission critical or near mission critical, or just ease of support type things that can benefit from managed power in this world?
Yeah. So you talk about the nines, right? And so I'm going to get this wrong. So but when you move, and because I did this exercise, and it depends on the technology you're talking about. But if you move from like the 99.9, you have, you can have 40 minutes, inside of a period, inside of a period of a month. But you move down to 4, it's 4 minutes. And so you start to look at what are the things that are going to match that 4 nines. What are the things that I cannot live without? That we're talking about point of sale. We're talking about your internet connectivity at your locations. You're talking about your firewalls that are providing routing and security. You're talking about switches that are providing power to your access points that is driving all of your wireless technology. So you start to think about what are the things that if other stuff was not working inside of my locations, if these things were up, would I be good to go? And that's what you're trying to work towards. You're starting to work from that critical and then on out. And, it's interesting because most organizations know that these things need to be in place. They know that they have to have good power. But again, I've had the conversations of, well, this one's plugged in over here. This one's daisy chained off of 3 different surge protectors over here. We know it needs to happen. They're just now starting to get to the point of there is an expense associated with putting this technology in for the first time. But what they see from visibility and from operational efficiency, they should be able to create ROI statements because, in a restaurant, think about it now today. Or retailers. We talk to them all the time where they say, I don't do offline orders anymore, or 70% of my orders
Oh,
are all
right.
offline. Well,
Yeah.
okay. Now think about if you're down for 10, 20, 30 minutes and it was a power related issue. Not even just power's down,
Sure.
something got unplugged. And then you don't know that. Well, with this solution, with these solutions that are out there, you know if that device was supposed to be plugged into plug-in 3 and plug-in 3 is showing no power. Oh, I mean that's a good indicator that you need to go
Yeah.
plug that device in or take a look at
Exactly.
it. So it's
Yeah.
really about they probably know what are the mission critical. But this gives them better insights into, wow, that really is mission critical, and this little amount of time of being offline causes huge downstream impacts.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think as certain pieces of technology in the customer journey become closer and closer to that mission critical environment, I think that kind of changes the conversation over time, right? And you think about even something simple, if you're going in somewhere and there's kiosks now and they've limited their staff and there are very few POS terminals and those kiosks are down, that could be a huge problem in traffic patterning. But you also talked about, the idea of I've now heard multiple brands talk about 100% mobile ordering. Well, in that scenario, then you have other devices that better be reacting to internet connectivity and orders coming in. It's not just that terminal at the POS cash wrap and making that come through if you're doing all mobile ordering. Yeah, that's very interesting. From a monitoring perspective, though, in managed power, is it just quote unquote can you turn it on and off, or what are those other things when you start to think about clean power or resilient power? What are those other things that really get looked at in that process?
Well, I think it's the thing that don't get looked at. I mean, a lot of it, to be honest, Ivy, a lot of it is it on, or did you turn it off and back on again? The ability to reset a device remotely, to toggle power, or just to make sure that something is on. What you have to go back and look at is some ticket volumes. And so, I go back in my Rolodex from a customer side of, how many were associated to, well, it was a power-related issue, or us as a managed service provider, a power-related issue. We could anecdotally put 50 to 70% of there's some power-related thing associated with, support. So you take that just from a numbers game, you're going to catch some of those issues there. But really, it's you talked about it again. These are not technologists for the most part at these locations. They're trying to do self-support. You've got an employee trying to do something. You don't want to have to send boots on the ground to get these locations to take a look at that. But it's not just, did you turn it off and back on again? Now let's get smart about it. Sustainability goals are huge for a lot of organizations as well. So what you can also see is a couple things. You can see load planning. So you plan a restaurant out or a retailer out based off of what you think the power draw is going to be in certain locations in certain areas. But do you really know? You do your best guesses. What you can do here is when everything is plugged in to a smart, monitored, managed power system, you now see exactly how much these technologies draw. And so how much they draw when they turn on, how much what it looks like when they're off, what it looks like when they're in a optimal state. And then you can start to look at, well, what does it look like when it's in a non-optimal state? So now we can start to go from very quickly reactive. Is it off, back on again? Let's reset it. We have visibility. We can see it. You can now go into the proactive and predictive, meaning I know this device is never supposed to draw below or above this amount of power. Well, it has been consistently for this amount of time. That leads me to believe that this may be a failure scenario in the future. Let's get ahead of that. So now you're starting to put predictability in to the equation. And then back to the sustainability, you want to know how much power do I really need for my locations? Am I too low? Am I, am I building it too low, or can I go a little higher? Do I need more? And then now you can build a blueprint for the rest of your locations because you've built in that knowledge. And taking that, what am I using at my locations? If organizations are trying, organizationally wide to be more clean, more efficient, move into LEED, not necessarily LEED certification. You're not going to do that as a restaurant. But moving into sustainability, it's one of those things. It's often overlooked. We talk about network and security and all this stuff all the time, and then we don't ever talk about the network is what's driving digital. You need that. Well, the power. You got to plug the network.
Right.
That's an area that we're forgetting about. And the insights that you can gain, and the cost savings you can gain I really wasn't efficient in how I used power previously. Now I'm getting smarter about that, and incrementally over time. Now I make investments in technology that is they're using cleaner power. So
Sure.
imagine take a firewall of say maybe 7 years ago or something, and you're holding on to that, and it draws this much power to do this job. Well, now you put in this new technology stack that uses 1/10 of the power, and you scale that across your entire environment. Now you're drawing less. You're drawing less from the grid. You're drawing less power in your stores. And if you extrapolate that out across all of your devices, moving into more clean, energy efficient devices, that's significant cost savings that you would have never realized before. But this just kind of provides you that insight, into that.
It's so interesting. You hit on just a few things there that I think are really key, and it's amazing. You jumped the gun in a good way on that sustainability conversation, because I think that was kind of my next position because of a conversation I was just having, which I'll elaborate on in a second. But I think one of the things you hit on there that I think is very key is there's always I think there's always been an assumption that there is power. Right. Yeah. So everybody goes, yeah, but we're assuming there's a circuit. We're assuming there's a plug. We're right. Okay, but we shouldn't assume that. And we also shouldn't assume, especially in many of these locations, that power is really clean. Right. The cleanliness of that power could be a real challenge depending on where it's coming from. But I think the other thing you hit on there that's actually very interesting is this idea of grooming the electrical profile like you might groom a network or a bandwidth usage, right? That can be a very powerful exercise for a retailer to really bring to life something that they're trying to do, or a restaurant where you've got hundreds of sites and really try to bring down the profile. But the third piece, which is just in pure sustainability, is I was just recently in a conversation that was mixed between a fair amount of U.S. providers and some European folks. And one of the things that's happening right now in Europe is there are some very, very strong sustainability requirements that are coming about for technology, especially in screen technology. And even to the point of the Europeans are looking at ways to utilize used screens that still have life, but use them in different ways. And then the government is giving actual sustainability credits associated with using that technology. But if you start to manage your energy profile and you start to manage that technology, that electrical usage, that could be very valuable in that perspective.
I mean, it could, and that's an interesting concept. And just from our own awareness, in the U.S., our grid isn't the best.
Right.
And so if we take steps, we and businesses all take steps to use power more effectively, use less of it when I can, use less of it. And then, so that's a huge thing from sustainability of the locations, but also just grid sustainability. That's huge. We're never going to ask less of it. With everything coming online electrical, we're going to ask more of it. But now when you talk about screens, think about, havoc that can go to screens and other devices when it's not clean power. When you're in what's worse than a power off? A brownout scenario where it's kind of off, kind of on, kind of off. That, in power, we call that sine wave regulation.
Right, exactly.
As clean of a sine wave as you can.
Right.
And so what these technologies allow you to do is create that clean, consistent power.
Yeah.
And if you bundle like a managed power unit with something like a smart battery backup, now you can do things called load shedding, because some people may not be aware, the grid doesn't provide always the same amount of power. Sometimes you're going to get something like a surge, right? Now surge protection goes away to make sure that your devices don't break, but it's still going to take a little bit of that hit. But if you have something like a battery backup, you can do something called load shedding. And what that is it takes that power and it gets rid of it before it ever gets to your devices. So again, what does that do? Now as an organization, I put in this clean power, I put in this regulation, and now I've brought in devices that are more energy efficient, sustainable. But now what I've also done is, because that power, that bad power, we're regulating it, and the too much power, we're getting rid of it. We're shunting it.
Yep.
Now that's not getting to that equipment. Your mean time to failure has gone up exponentially.
Yeah.
If you read the fine print of any of your technologies out there, your screens or anything else, and the warranty included, a lot of times in ideal conditions. It
Right.
Are you maintaining ideal conditions? Or are you just plugging it into the same thing that
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
we talk, be better stewards of the power that we have.
Yeah.
Get more energy efficient devices to plug into this technology, and then it will keep the life of that technology. So maybe I'm replacing these every 3 years. Well, why is that?
Yeah.
Maybe
right.
this can help them be 4
right.
or 5 or 6
right.
years.
Yep.
It's just things all you think about is the upfront cost, but you never
Sure.
think about the downstream savings that you're going to get from it. Right?
Yeah.
That's
an
interesting concept.
I think everybody's probably heard it come out of my mouth, right? Day 2, day 50 and beyond. How do you get there, right? How do you make that more valuable? So all right. So let's wrap this up. Let's get a few sweet nuggets of dessert here.
Yeah.
If someone is not using power or not exactly sure where to go, we've kind of gone down a few routes. Some of them are more detailed than others. Give us 3 kind of real considerations that a retailer or restaurant should be looking at when starting to look at managed power, and what are those things that like they're a must have if they're going down this route?
Yeah, you have to start with what things are plugging into. One, you got to make sure that you got good power coming to your location.
Right.
But there's a lot of these organizations that they've had the power in the building for so long, and it's going to be significantly expensive to just redo all of that. So they need something to condition the power. So where do you start?
Right.
A PDU, we call it a PDU, power distribution unit. Where do the things actually get plugged into? And so that's kind of the brains of the operation. It's connected to the network. Out of band management. So even if your other internet connectivity is down, you can still get to this device and toggle things. That's where you start. You got to have a good place to plug stuff in, but that takes space to do that, and obviously you're unplugging things,
right?
So that's
right.
There's an impact there, but once that's done, everything's online. Now you're cooking with gas, and so now you have data going in, data going out. We can make very interesting decisions. The quicker you put things in, and the more time you let them run, then you can learn about the environment and start building, different parameters around. I went from reactive. How do I get to proactive predictive? And what do I mean by that? Proactive predictive means these cable modems or fiber modems, whatever, they're notorious for. You do actually, as part of the standard troubleshooting, you have to turn them off every once in a while. They're not meant to run forever.
Yeah.
So can I schedule that out? Absolutely. Can I do these things in sequence because I know that this device can't come back up before this device? No problem. It's just data. So start with that one unit, learn about your environment, build some smarts, and then build that into your new store plan or anything going for. A lot of organizations said this is now my standard. I don't deploy without this. It is part of my new building cost to have these devices in there. And the beauty of the technology now, it is not just relegated to data center. It's not these huge, gargantuan, cumbersome, complex things.
Sure.
They can fit any size of an environment. We standardize on a certain amount of devices plugged in, but now they have devices that can be separate inside of the store that can be Wi-Fi based toggle, right? So it connects to your Wi-Fi network. That if you need to toggle a device on the other side of the store, but you don't want to run Ethernet or something else over there, or outside, right? That's fine. We have different technologies for that. So it's just interesting that it's another one of those technologies that it was only for the big boys. It was only for the high, super business critical. But talk to a restaurant on what they think is business critical now. There's a lot more to it than that. So there's the availability of it, and then managing the headache away from it. That's something that we do. Of an organization doesn't want to have to go out there and deploy them. If they have to support them, are they going to have the people out there, and then have a centralized dashboard to view it all? That's kind of bringing it all together. We're in a very very sweet spot for power right now. That just even a couple years ago, we really weren't.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I think that's a fantastic overview. There's obviously a lot more considerations when you move into a new technology or even something you might know about but haven't deployed. And I love that idea of, kind of Moore's law. It was out there for the big boys, and now it's getting down in the process. I think that's great. I also, as you start talking about unplugging things, just don't cut the green wire, right? Let's leave that alone, right? So, well, great. Well, thank you very much, Court. As always, good to talk to you about new and fun stuff. I know we'll be out on the road over the coming months and weeks, and so hopefully we see each other as well as many of our friends and customers out there. So
and again, you will have the power if you start.
That's right. You will have the power. Yep.
Always great to talk with you, Ivy. Until next time.
Thanks, Court. Talk to you soon. Thanks for tuning in to the Phygital Dish, where physical and digital worlds collide to transform industries and consumer experiences. We hope today's episode gave you the insight you need to stay ahead in this evolving landscape. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and join us next time for another serving of industry advice and innovations from the intersection of technology and business. And remember, stay inspired, keep innovating, and we'll catch you next time.